All right. Last night in the Victorian Parliament we had an historic vote. Yesterday in the Legislative Council and then last night in the Legislative Assembly where in an unprecedented way the Parliament called on Jacinta Allen, or was being asked to call on Jacinta. I think Jacinta Allen should appear because the Commonwealth Games debacle was itself unprecedented. We haven't seen anything like it in recent memory. It was such a fiasco. The waste of money was bad enough. The lack of planning was bad enough. But then you've got the cover-up. Attempts after attempts to block any kind of proper and thorough inquiry into how this disaster happened. The humiliation to Victoria's reputation, the loss of hundreds of millions of dollars, and that figure continues to grow. Why can't Jacinta Allen just say, well, I know I don't have to appear, but I know the right thing is to appear? Jacinta Allen said that things were going to change under her. Well, we're waiting. Nothing's changed yet. We see Jacinta Allen doubling down on projects with massive cost blowouts with no indication about how she's going to put a stop to the blowouts. We've had no difference between Jacinta Allen and Daniel Andrews on covering up the budget and the level of debt, taxes, you name it, all of that continues under Jacinta Allen as if nothing changed. And then here we have an example of Jacinta Allen being presented with an opportunity where she can really distinguish herself from a predecessor and say, well, Daniel Andrews never did this and never would have done it, but I'm different. I'm going to respond to the public's interest in finding out the real truth about what happened. And we've used every possible opportunity in question time. Let me make it clear. In question time after question time, we have asked Jacinta Allen and given her opportunities to tell the Victorian people in a very candid and comprehensive way what she knew and when she knew it. For example, when did she tell the Department of Treasury and the Department of Premier and Cabinet that the budget had blown out and that she was seeking more? She doesn't want to tell the Victorian people that because she knows she made that submission many months before the decision to cancel the Games was actually made. So yeah, we all get it. Jacinta Allen has the right not to appear if she really doesn't want to. But it's not right to refuse to appear. The right thing to do would be to appear. On the High Court's historic decision yesterday on the EV tax, this was another debacle in the making. But today our concern is whether Jacinta Allen is going to use this decision now as an opportunity to jack up a whole range of other taxes. We heard her Treasurer today talk about reviewing Victoria's tax base, obviously under the pressure that Jacinta Allen's government has created, where you've got budget pressures on debt, on interest repayments, on programs blowing out, major projects blowing out. So this government, when it says it's looking at taxes, it's to raise them. Which brings me to some announcements that Georgie Crozier and Jess Wilson will make in a few moments. This highlights the big difference between myself and Jacinta Allen, the teams we lead. When Jacinta Allen talks about taxes, rest assured taxes will go up. When my colleagues and I talk about taxes, it's about how can we lower taxes so Victorians don't have to deal with the ever-growing pressures on their household budgets and businesses dealing with more and more pressures that drive them out of their operations and see job losses. We want to get taxes down. We want to provide all Victorians in business and in Victorian households with tax relief to ease the cost of living pressures they're facing and which are growing every day. It's a big difference between myself and Jacinta Allen. I want to provide an economy and opportunities that ease the cost of living and lower taxes. Jacinta Allen and Tim Pallas, like a broken record, every time they talk about tax, it's to go up. And this EV tax debacle that we've seen unfold in the last 24 hours cannot be another opportunity for Jacinta Allen and Tim Pallas to jack up taxes again. I'll turn first to Georgie, who's going to talk about a tax announcement in health, and then we'll go to Jess Wilson as well.
Thanks so much, JP. This morning I've introduced a private member's bill into the Legislative Council, and it is to amend the Payroll Taxation Act, because what we have seen this government do is, as John's just explained, is put more taxes on the Victorian community. And what is happening in the health system is a health tax that is going to hit GPs, it's going to hit dentists, physiotherapists, psychologists, everybody who has a tenanted spot in a medical clinic providing services and healthcare and management of millions of Victorians are going to be hit by this health tax. This bill will repeal that. It will stop that health tax going through. And we need to do that because, as the RACGP, the AMA and others have said, if the government proceeds with this health tax, 30% of GP clinics around Victoria will close. That is going to jeopardise millions of Victorians being able to access primary health care. It's going to put more pressure on our already struggling health system, on our emergency departments that can't cope now. This is a bad tax. The government needs to repeal it, and that's why I'm introducing a private member's bill, and that's why I have introduced a private member's bill into the Parliament this morning.
Thanks, Georgia. Jess.
Thanks very much, John. And today we've announced that under coalition government, no school in Victoria, public or private, will pay payroll tax. The Independent Parliamentary Budget Office, the independent watchdog, has released a report this morning that confirms what we already knew. When payroll tax is levied on public schools, there is no net impact on the state budget. And for that reason, there is no reason to levy payroll tax on public schools. The levying of payroll tax on public schools has been the government's defence to its levying of payroll tax on non-government schools. It's schools tax. Every time they're asked about the imposition of their schools tax on non-government schools, and even yesterday the Deputy Premier said, well, they are going to pay it because state schools pay it. Well, what we've seen today is that the levying of payroll tax on public schools in Victoria has no net impact on the budget. Under a coalition government, we will remove the requirement for public schools to pay payroll tax, removing that administrative burden for those schools, and we will repeal Labor's schools tax.
Thanks, Jess. We'll see. Any questions for any of us?
Maybe for Georgie first.
Yep.
Does your bill have the support of the crossbench?
There are many crossbenchers that are concerned about this, and I have spoken to some of those. Obviously, I haven't introduced the bill more formally in terms of the outlining of what the bill will do, but they understand. They too understand that the government's payroll tax, the health tax, is going to have a massive impact on their constituents. So I'm in discussion with those crossbenchers, and the discussions I've had so far have been very favourable.
Any other questions?
When do you think that'll go to a vote? Sorry, Georgie? Roughly, so we can be recording.
It won't be obviously this week, but in the coming weeks, once that gets, I'll be doing the second reading and then putting it on. It needs time for the government to consider, so it's a few weeks off yet.
All right.
John, the Treasurer was out this morning saying that he and other Treasurers around the country are a bit worried about the High Court's decision in terms of how states can charge medical taxes. How will that work into your future tax plan to resolve this?
Well, I'm happy to say that the Shadow Treasurer, Brad Rosewell, and the Shadow Finance Minister, Jess, and other members of the economic team are travelling around Victoria at the moment, taking submissions and consulting with individual businesses, stakeholder groups and the community more generally about their ideas. We've certainly got a lot of work that we are planning to do in this space to look at how taxes can be made more sustainable in the sense that they lower the burdens on households and businesses. My concern, though, about what Labor governments right across Australia, remember we've got Labor governments everywhere, in every state and at the Commonwealth level, is they're all going to have an appetite, as they invariably do, to raise taxes, and they're going to give each other cover to raise taxes, and that's our concern here. When we want businesses to grow and invest more, and we want households to be given the opportunity to deal with growing cost of living pressures, we're concerned that there's kind of like a Labor political cartel where they're all together in this, all Labor governments, all with an appetite to increase taxes. So yes, everybody's going to work through the consequences and implications of the High Court decision, but equally we have a very different outlook to Labor, and Labor has shown, even in the short time that Jacinta Allen has been the Premier, that they are inclined to increase taxes and announce new ones. So that's where you'll see the difference between us and them.
The Queensland LNP leader has walked back the party's commitment to work towards treaty. Have any of your colleagues come to you and asked you to reconsider the opposition's stance on it?
We have seen nothing from the government, and as you will recall, in the last parliament, we didn't oppose the establishment of the treaty-making authority, but that was subject to seeing what would eventuate. And our position is we're going to wait and see what the government proposes. My understanding is the government isn't itself sure about how it wants to proceed in this space now, particularly after the weekend. So we'll see what the government is going to propose, but at this stage we're not entertaining any immediate decisions on the matter. We're obviously, like everybody across the country, at an individual level and at a government level, everybody's assessing the implications of what happened on the weekend. We understand that to be the case with Jacinta Allen and her government, that they too are looking at the consequences and implications of the weekend and also unsure about how they'll proceed in this space as well. So we'll wait and see what comes forward.
So is it unlikely that the opposition would even look at its position until the treaty deal is on the table?
Well, it's hard to oppose something that hasn't been presented. So we're not going to consider anything until we see it from the government. We'll form our own views going into the 2026 election, but obviously we expect that something will come in the time between now and then. So we'll look at what the government proposes. But at this stage, the government hasn't signalled that it's anywhere near being in a position to present anything for public consultation or for the Parliament to consider.
The government keeps saying that it needs to seek legal advice to give refunds back to people on the EV charges. Surely, if it's unconstitutional, they shouldn't have to repay it.
Who's the government kidding, really? The decision is clear for everybody. The legislation was invalid. Everybody who paid tax under the legislation is due a refund. It's just fair. And it's wrong for the government to say we're waiting on legal advice. Really? Wouldn't most Victorians be looking at this and thinking, well, if the High Court struck down your law, you should never have imposed it, and the fair thing to do is to return the money. What, you're going to hide behind your lawyers who might look for a technical out clause? I don't think anyone thinks that's fair or right.
What did you make of...
Sorry, do you think people should question other taxes like the Airbnb tax and see if they are valid?
Well, we certainly oppose the Airbnb tax. We think we shouldn't be we shouldn't have a government that's taxing holidays in this way, the highest in the country and the first in the country. It's the wrong thing to do anyway. More generally, it's a matter for people if they want to contest taxes. I mean, what we do want to see is a stable taxation regime. One of the complaints we've had about the Andrews and now the Allen government is that they have always been shifting the goalposts, and their actions over many years, in particular with the Commonwealth Games and the taxes they've just announced in the last couple of weeks, creates more and more sovereign risk. And taxes, like government policy, need to provide a stable environment for households to plan and for businesses to make important investment decisions and job decisions in terms of who they are going to employ. So in terms of our taxation regime, government should always be getting advice on whether taxes are being appropriately levied and appropriately framed. But I think governments can help by not creating uncertainty and instability in the taxation system, and certainly not acting in a way which creates sovereign risk. And that's what we've seen even in the last few months.
What did you make of Tim Pallas's suggestion that they might find a workaround to the EV tax by potentially charging people via the car registration?
If there's a way for Jacinta Allen and Tim Pallas to tax people, I'm sure they'll take that opportunity. I think they've got form on that. But what we've long argued in the last couple of years is that we want people to take up EVs, and to tax them at this early stage is not going to assist in that, and it's going to discourage people from buying EVs at the very time we want them to do that. At some point we do have to have a closer look at road user charges, but our concern, which we've been on the record having maintained now for some time, is that now's not the right time to slap a tax on EVs when we want people to take them up. And yes, there will be a time where you need to look more broadly at how you fund the maintenance and upgrades and construction of our roads.
We have a date for the by-election in Mulgrave. Would you like a candidate to be run by?
Yeah. Look, I think we are built as a party to run, but these things are always subject to the processes of the Liberal Party, and we have a decision tonight, and the Administrative Committee of the Liberal Party will make that decision tonight.
Is that you'd like to see a candidate run?
Well, I've always been of a view that the party is built to run. We are there to contest elections and to make sure that as often as possible that we can provide people with a Liberal how to vote card. with a Liberal candidate they can get behind. But I've got to stress, we have processes in the party and we've got to follow those processes. So admin will make that decision tonight. But it won't surprise anyone to learn that as leader, I want to contest every part of the state wherever I possibly can. But also I've been in the party a long time and we have to plan our decisions and follow processes that have been long established within the party.
Is that seat winnable given the huge margin that it has at the moment?
Look, it is a very significant margin and winning it would be very, very difficult. It was held by a former Premier. Now, we had lots of criticisms of the former Premier, but it's been held with a healthy margin by the Labor Party for a long time. But the questions we have to entertain go beyond whether we can just win it. It's about whether we can and should deploy the resources and make the investments we need to as a party to provide the people of Mulgrave with that opportunity to vote for a Liberal candidate. Thank you very much. Excuse.
Thank you.